Hello, and welcome to GTMF Musical Road Trips. My name is Meaghan Heinrich, and I'll be your host. You may be stuck at home, but we're ready to take you on a virtual vacation of amazing music. You'll meet our musicians, see where they live, and I'll be here to guide you as we explore their music by moving, singing, dancing, and clapping along. And now, buckle your seatbelts because we're off on our musical road trip. Every summer in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, the Grand Teton Music Festival brings together 200 of the country's finest orchestral musicians to make music together in the mountains. Even though we couldn't be together this summer, our musicians still wanted to share their music with an audience, so we created On Location, a series of digital concerts from our beloved festival musicians' home cities. This project is partially funded by a grant from the Community Foundation of Jackson Hole and Town and County Arts for All. Many thanks as well to the Festival Auxiliary for their support of this program. Let's give them all a big thank you on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Thank you! Today we're heading to the Big Apple, New York City. Our concert takes place in the beautiful St. Bartholomew's Church on Park Avenue, a building with striking architecture and a long history of great music. You'll see and hear these festival musicians: Stephanie Mortimer, Piccolo; Bruno Eicher, violin; Ling Huang, violin; Mary Hammond, viola; Kari Jane Doctor, cello; and Paolo Bordignon, harpsichord. The first piece of music on our program today features a unique instrument, the piccolo. If you've ever seen or heard a flute, the piccolo is like its younger sibling, a smaller version with a higher pitched sound. In fact, piccolo is the Italian word for small. Our music also comes from Italy, a concerto by the great Baroque composer Antonio Vivaldi. You'll hear the high sound of the piccolo accompanied by the cello and harpsichord, and that will alternate with the lower, fuller sound of all the strings playing together. You'll also hear that it's music you can march to with beats in groups of 2. Follow along with me as we march with our fingertips on our palms when we hear the high, sparkly sound of the piccolo, and march with our feet and our whole bodies when we hear the lower sound of the strings. And when the marching beat stops altogether, that means it's time for the piccolo to play a cadenza, a sort of musical freestyle, which means that you get to freestyle too. This is the third movement of Antonio Vivaldi's Concerto for Piccolo and Strings, featuring our marvelous piccolo player, Stephanie Mortimer. Great marching, everyone. Next, one of our violinists gets to step into the spotlight for a very different kind of music. I got to speak on Zoom with violinist Ling Huang from her apartment in New York. Let's hear more about it. Hello, Ling. How are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you, Megan?
I'm doing all right. So you are in New York right now?
I am.
Tell us a little bit about living in New York.
Living in New York. Well, it's snowy today. We got 16 inches. It was the biggest storm in 5 years. So it was kind of a really exciting day yesterday for everyone just to go out and enjoy the snow a little bit. You know, in a lot of ways, New York is a difficult city to live in if you're not very wealthy or have a lot of means. But as an artist, it's such a great place, kind of because there's just so much going on. You have some of the best institutions, organizations, art museums. Almost everything is here for you to enjoy if you have time and money. And that isn't always the case, but there's also just so many people trying to make their dreams come true. So there's a huge variety of projects and collaborations that are really exciting.
So you said a lot of people trying to achieve their dreams. Is there a musical dream that you've gotten to experience in New York as a musician?
I've had some really great successes here. I guess this year with the pandemic, things have slowed down a lot. But I got to play for the soundtrack of a movie that's coming out soon. And it's exciting. One of the CDs that I recorded last year with the Experiential Orchestra was just nominated for a Grammy. So it's my first time being part of a Grammy nominated classical ensemble. And I got to play with the New York Philharmonic a few times while I was here.
Wow, that's a lot of musical dreams. Said you played for the soundtrack of a movie that's coming out?
Yeah.
What's
Um,
the name
it's
of it?
it's about Fred Hampton and the Black Panthers. It's a very timely movie, and it was such a powerful experience. So
That sounds incredible. I think a lot of people don't realize when they hear the music in a movie that those are real live musicians playing
yeah,
and recording that music. So next time you go to the movies, listen to the music and think about who might be playing it. It must be pretty different then to come out to Wyoming in the summertime. That's really different from being in
oh
New
yeah.
York City. Why do you like coming to the Grand Teton Music Festival?
Oh well, I love hiking. You know, in New York, I play a lot more with these kind of like fringe groups. I do a lot more new music. A lot of concerts where there are other mediums going on at the same time, and that's really fun and definitely an interest of mine. But I feel like at the Tetons, I get, there's some experimental stuff, but there's also like a chance to play these huge classics that I grew up loving and studying, and I don't usually have that experience. And also in New York, everyone kind of gets together for the gigs, and you're happy to see each other, and everyone's at a really high caliber. It's different because everyone at Grand Tetons is kind of coming from like a professional job doing what they're still going to do at the Tetons. And so it's amazing to play with people who are just incredible at the top of their field for so many weeks in a row.
So, we are going to hear you play this piece, Still Life Crumbles, on the violin. And speaking of experimental, it seems like you do some really interesting things with your violin besides just regular bowing in this piece. Can you show us some of those little musical experiments?
Yeah, sure. One of the most exciting things about this piece that was really challenging was that it's violin and harpsichord, which is a pretty unusual duo. And she really, instead of kind of amplifying the differences in our instruments, wanted to find places of togetherness. So a lot of the time, these techniques I'm doing are meant to mimic what a harpsichord sounds like. There's a lot more pits and a lot of fast pits, like, and then even accents. that kind of dissolve into this grainy, kind of like the edginess of the harpsichord at the end of the note. I guess in trying to sound like this other instrument, I kind of had to forsake a lot of what's more classically beautiful. She specifies a lot of non-vib in very melodic places. So normally I'd want to play like, I'd want to make a maybe longer line with lots of vibrato, something that's clearly a song. But she specified over the bridge, flotando, over the fingerboard. And I wasn't able to wiggle my fingers because she said non-vibrato.
Wow, and that gives your violin such a different sound to hear those two back to back. It sounds so much spookier or maybe more ghostly when you play it in
That's
that
good to hear.
Wonderful. And finally, is there anything special that you think we should listen for in this piece?
Oh, you can kind of see how close we get in being one instrument. And there are good places for that where I'll do an accent at the same moment that Paolo, the harpsichordist, strikes a note. There's not really a way to hit a harpsichord note softly because it's a percussion instrument, basically. So I'll mimic him, and then we kind of melt together, like, and we dissolve together. And I think it is kind of like our attempt at crumbling together, but we have to like do it in a way that seems really organic and like really one gesture. So that's a fun thing. You can see if we achieved that.
That sounds like a great thing to look for, almost like you're dancing together.
Yes, I love that.
Well, thank you so much, Ling Ling. We can't wait to hear you perform this piece.
Thank you so much for having me.
The name of the piece we'll hear Ling Ling play is Still Life Crumbles. Composer TONIA was inspired by a poem to create this title. What do you think those words mean? Can you draw a picture of what you hear? Listen for the sounds that we heard from the violin as we hear Still Life Crumbles by TONIA, performed by violinist Ling Huang and harpsichordist Paolo Bordignon. For our last piece, we'll hear the violin once again, but this time in a group with two other string instruments, the cello, which has the lowest voice, and the viola, which has a sound in the middle between the violin and the cello. A group of 3 musicians playing together is called a trio. The music we'll hear is older than Still Life Crumbles, but not quite as old as Vivaldi's Piccolo Concerto. It's by one of the greatest composers who ever lived, Ludwig van Beethoven. And I'm going to need your help as we listen. Grab a piece of paper and something to write with. On one side of our paper, we are going to write the letter A with a stormy picture. You can make an angry face if you like, or some storm clouds with lightning bolts. On the other side, write the letter B with a happy, sunny picture. I've got a smiley face and a sunshine in mine. Our piece of music has two different sections, A and B. And just like in the alphabet, A comes first. So we'll hold up our cards on the A side as we hear the stormy minor key section. In the middle, the music will change and sound like the sun coming out from behind the clouds. Flip your card over when you hear that to show the B side. Now, what you might not expect is that after that, the stormy A section returns. So be ready to flip your cards over once again. Please welcome our wonderful festival musicians as we hear the Scherzo from Ludwig van Beethoven's String Trio in C minor. Thank you so much for joining us today for our musical road trip to New York City. On behalf of the Grand Teton Music Festival and all of our festival musicians, we are so grateful to be sharing our music with you. Join us for our other musical road trips where you'll visit Chicago, Houston, and more. We'd also love to hear from you. Send us an email or a letter, and maybe we'll include it in one of our future concert videos. Until next time, I'm your host, Megan, and I hope you'll keep making music of your own.